I entered the civil rights movement or civil rights struggle before I entered the auto industry. So I was part of the civil rights or social struggle before I became a part of the trade union movement as a whole. A matter of fact, I marched down Woodward Avenue in 1963 with Martin Luther King when Walter Reuther was in the front row with him. I did the same thing again in Washington in August of 1963 with the big march there with Walter Reuther, and Martin Luther King together. So I considered myself a part of this social movement before I considered myself a trade unionist, you see. And I think it's kind of important to me in my consciousness because of that I never saw the difference between the two. You don't have an active trade union movement without a social movement, and you don't have an adequate social movement without some participation from the trade union movement. You know, it kind of became my forte as I saw how these things unfolded in my mind. I was always involved in social activity in the city. My first time, when I was at Wayne State, we had a little organization on campus called Uhuru, which was Swahili for freedom. And we would agitate around the city, around various issues of discrimination. I remember early on, but even before the King March, that this prostitute named Cynthia Scott was shot 3 times in the back by Officer Spicer on the Detroit Police Force, which is a white officer, and nothing ever happened to him. And the black community was in motion over this fact that this woman could get shot dead like this and nothing happened. So our little group as Uhuru had joined these movements and protests, and we had street rallies at the Brewster Projects, at the Jeffries Projects down on 12th and Pingries, which was kind of concentrations of a poor black community, So I was involved in that kind of activity. Matter of fact, part of the reason or the momentum for King's huge march in Detroit in June of '63 was based in those struggles coming out of police brutality and fighting around things like Cynthia Scott. The first time I was arrested for disturbing the peace because in 1963 there was a real struggle to get the 1968 Olympic Games brought to Detroit. Now this is '63 because you got the '64 games coming up. So 4 years after that, you want the games here. The Detroit City Council had turned down an open occupancy law. I think at that time we only had one black guy on Detroit City Council. That was William T. Patrick. And so the civil rights organizations came together and said, well, how are we going to have the Olympic Games in the city and we don't even have an open occupancy law here, where people from all over the world can come to the city for an Olympic Games and you can't even live anyplace. So a big protest developed, and we went downtown to a big protest where they had this Olympic committee in the States had brought the Olympic torch all the way from California to Detroit, showing how bad they wanted the Olympic Games. They had the Detroit Police Band downtown playing, and but we had the NAACP, CORE, and all the rest of these groups downtown. And our little group, we was active in it too. And what happened was that we started singing "We Shall Overcome," and they whipped up the Star Spangled Banner and started playing the national anthem. So we had just pretty much destroyed their little rally they were having, because they were filming all this, and they was going to send it to Germany to the Olympic Committee so they could make a judgment on how bad we wanted it. So the city fathers were so upset. They after the thing was over, they sent out a word to all the civil rights organizations that they wanted us to come downtown and apologize for what we had done. So the NAACP, Urban League, CORE, all of them went downtown to apologize. And we sent them a letter saying, we don't apologize for nothing black people do. Anything, you owe us an apology. So when I got home from work that night, they had warrants out for our arrest. So 5 of us from the Uhuru group was arrested for disturbing the peace. But the underlying issue was we supposedly were booing and hissing during the playing of the national anthem, even though they started playing the national anthem to try to drown out, "We Shall Overcome."